forgot the button. In terms of the evacuation procedure, the members are happy, and I don't see any new public in the gallery, so I don't intend to do the evacuation procedure. Apologies, Alan. Apologies.
Sorry, Madam Mayor. Apologies. Same as the previous meeting. Councillor Brindley, Councillor Doherty, Councillor Gizane, Councillor Gran, Councillor Tony Lloyd, Councillor Tracy Shepherd, and I'm not sure if any other member is left.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, can I add Councillor Doughty's name to that list of apologies?
You can. Thank you. Are there any other declarations of interest that's not already covered under the agenda? No. Public speaking. 20 minutes is set aside for public speaking. Members of the public will have 3 minutes each to speak about the motion on the agenda, or ask the leader or relevant portfolio any questions in contact with those matters. Any member of the public wishes to speak? No. As the first signature to the request, do you wish to move the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Agenda. In moving the motion, Madam Mayor, it is with some regret, actually, because had we been allowed the opportunity to debate and discuss this at the last full council, we would not be in this position, certainly with regards to this motion tonight. One of the fundamental principles and jobs and duties of a councillor is to vote on and set the budget. We do that every February. Any major amendments to the budget come to full council, and councillors have their say. We have our disagreements over the chamber, but whatever happens, we get to vote on it, or at least debate it. And that opportunity has been completely denied under this system which has been employed for this. I can accept minor changes and monetary movements here and there, but to take on an additional £1.2 million worth of debt is in no way minor. And we should all remember from the outset that this money which we are borrowing won't be repaid just because we're the council. It will be repaid because the council taxpayers have no choice but to pay the council tax. We are funding this by effectively mortgaging the council taxpayers of this borough. Now, the original proposal to move the depot had, by and large, cross-party support. The decision to buy Gresham Road was more or less presented really as a fait accompli, but on behalf of the opposition, we accepted it in the grand scheme of things. It was necessary to move forward because St Mary's is not fit for purpose. It's probably not even really fit for the 19th century anymore, let alone the 21st. However, our support for the move of the depot to the new area is not a blank cheque. It is not a signal of unconditional support. There must be, and always should be, a degree of scrutiny of these items. That is essentially what the job of a councillor is. And I am flabbergasted, Madam Mayor, that the budget for the reforms to Gresham Road have escalated from £625,000, which was within the original budget more or less, to a staggering £1.9 million now. If anyone in the private sector had misestimated their figures to that sum, they would be looking for a new job. If anyone in any other area of the private sector, of the public sector, was looking at problems of that magnitude in their budgets, they would be looking for a new job. It should be no different here. It is not enough for political leadership to hide behind officers. There is, and always has been in the constitutional arrangements of this country, that the political leadership of any council, regardless of its political makeup, takes responsibility for the actions of the council. Why, when we first agreed to buy Gresham Road, were the additional items not forecast? Why, are we having to construct completely new offices and meeting rooms, which are all of a sudden coming out of thin air, need to be constructed and find additional money? Why are we having to construct a whole new road abutting the A444 to allow a one-way vehicle movement system? These may be operational requirements, but these should have been in the original business plan which was presented to Council and to councillors to discuss and know, going forward with their eyes wide open, what the budgetary implications would be. That is the essence of this motion, pure and simple. Now, we have experienced, unfortunately, this council getting its budgets wrong before, and we have had our political disagreements, but the fundamental issue has always been we have discussed it in this chamber and had a vote on it, and that is what we are seeking to do tonight. The motion before us is trying to correct what has gone wrong, and what it is doing is seeking to actually mandate the officers and the portfolio holder responsible to present a full business plan to this council for debate, discussion and ratification, so that members have a clear document on which to hold officers and members of the Cabinet to account. I am, quite frankly, disappointed that there is a lack of this going on, because these are significant sums of money. I would hope that those who are custodians of the residents of this borough's taxpayers' money will vote for this tonight, because it is about ensuring we get things right going forward, because somewhere along the line, Madam Mayor, it has not gone right. To have to incur another £1.2 million in debt, in borrowing, something has gone wrong somewhere. And we should also remember, at a time when we are financially constrained and having to find money for the general revenue account budget, any additional borrowing we undertake has to be serviced in the general fund account somewhere. I move this motion and hope it will get cross-party support, Madam Mayor.
I second the motion.
Speaker, it's an important issue this time. We were neglected as an agenda item last time. I tried to speak on item 8. It was pushed to item 12, and then there was no debate on item 12. So we've had a long wait for this debate. Going back last year, 9 months ago is when we should have had this business case, when the plans were being firmed up. And yeah, it's a £2 million project now, the fit out, and we should have had a debate as to whether we could do it cheaper and whether we needed all the meeting rooms in the new depot. We have spare space at the Bedworth Civic Hall. We have industrial units owned by this council. If we couldn't afford to do all this work at Gresham Road, we could have thought outside the box to work out how much work do we actually need to do at Gresham Road and how much could be allocated in other areas. We also have the markets. In addition to this £2 million moving to Gresham Road, the market is going to be equipment is going to be relocated to the back of the car park in Harefield Road. There's lots of other expenditure that is probably creeping out the woodworks as this £2 million gradually works its way up to £2.1, £2.2 million. This is an almighty amount of money being spent. Our capital programme is getting bigger and bigger, as if capital expenditure doesn't matter. This council is facing over £80 million of debt next year. You see these graphs of doom from the housing revenue and it's debt, and debt costs serious money to service. We need to be more careful, and we need to discuss stuff. It's not that I'm a great expert on anything, or anyone's a great expert, but by discussing stuff, having a meeting and a scrutiny on a subject like the depot move means you get the benefit of everyone's expertise and ideas, and at that stage people can challenge, do we need that many car parking spaces? Do we need that many council vehicles to be taken to the depot every night? We can start thinking about what we're doing, and we can save hundreds of thousands of pounds. This project was never going to cost £600,000. It was going to cost more, and the problem we've had is it's been kept secret, the overspend. We've not been allowed to discuss it until it's got worse and worse and worse. It's like a little child who's done something really naughty and not telling his parents, and just compounding the mistake by doing more and more naughty things, and then eventually it all comes out. Well, actually, it's all come out that we've got £2 million plus in expenditure. Yeah, we haven't got a time machine. This is not going to fix the problem, this motion, but it will actually start to put people in the right mindset. We need to do a business case and we need to discuss things. In the Treasury Management Strategy, going to the Audit Committee, it highlighted that the depot refurbishment was coming up and it would go to Cabinet. Yet this thing that was an urgent manager decision was supposed to go to Cabinet. How can a £2 million spending suddenly become an urgent decision the managing director has to sign off in a day? These things are built over time. And it's a totally... you don't want to use the word corrupt because it's not corrupt. It's incompetent. Or it's what? It's dishonest. But you can't just say, urgently, we need to spend £2 million. This spending pressure became apparent probably months before opposition councillors were made aware of it. And it's a total shambles. And I hope we never make such a mess again.
Thank you. Any other member? Councillor Harvey?
Madam Mayor, under the mistaken impression that because he says something, it's true. So he says all sorts of things all evening, every cabinet meeting, every council meeting. It's not corrupt, but it's incompetent. It's neither, councillor, because I have every faith in the advice given to us by our officers and in the decisions that have been taken here and signed off by the managing director. And so do the external auditors. And if you haven't read the external audit report, we'll send you another copy. And the same goes for the Conservative opposition. Because, Madam Mayor, it has been this council's long-held view, and I would think the people of Abbey Green in particular, to move the depot from a totally inaccessible site in terms of getting all of this borough to the Bermuda area. In fact, we've made attempts before to buy sites, and we've lost them. But there came the opportunity to buy this site. If we had brought forward the bid to full council, somebody else, this is, well, you know, I shouldn't have to teach you about the capitalist society. I thought you were experts. Somebody else would have jumped in and got it for a bit more, but we made a terrific saving on buying that site. Our officers have then taken stock of what needs to be done and come back with great detail about exactly what needs to be done, which will benefit this borough enormously and financially. And you don't need to believe me. I'm sure you've already asked the finance director how we will actually be saving money over the years by this depot. In actual fact, we paid $1,475,000 compared to the asking price of $1,750,000. So we got a capital asset for a start. It's not money down the drain. Immediately. We've then got the necessity, a decision had to be made very quickly on how much this could cost, and since then things were found that we had to spend more. But equally, the money we're going to get for the depot we've got now is more than it was. So even with the borrowing, we are still going to be far better off, and the residents of Abbey Ward certainly will be far better off than having all the dustbin wagons and what have you trailing through their area morning, noon and night, and the town centre. Think of the distance to Kersley. Think of the distance to Gallycommon from the town and getting the wagons in and out of there. So this roadway that has to be constructed will give us a much better access to this site. And think of the years that we're going to have this site. You don't have to go into all that amount of years, and any borrowing that is done via the finance department is only done on their good advice. When people talk about people getting the sack, I find that's absolutely appalling. That's what you did. You said in the private sector, people would have got the sack. Well, you must be talking about staff, because sad to say, you can't sack me, which you don't.
I say that members of the of staff here should be fired. I said that the responsibility lies with the political leadership. Perhaps the leader should consider his own position instead of trying to put it on to the members of staff.
taken out of my time. I'm not going to resign because the Conservatives and the Green leader don't like me. What's new? I'm actually quite glad about it, because I don't think I'd be doing a very good job as the Labour leader if you did, because your economics are from the madhouse if you're not actually thinking about this. It has been described as the controversial super depot. Well, yes, it's super, because it's fantastic for the job it's got to do. It's controversial, yes, because we can see the good sense that has been put forward to us and you can't. That's the controversy. So let's stop talking absolute rubbish, Madam Mayor, and throw this motion out once and for all, and let's get back to a little bit of common sense and good economics.
Councillor Golby.
I'd just like to pick up on a couple of things, if I may. It's nice to hear Councillor Harvey say that the residents are better off, or going to be better off, not having wagons trailing through the area around the St Mary's Park. Are you going to afford that honour to my residents when you stand up and say don't open the Bermuda Bridge because we don't want wagons trailing through the area night and day? I'm still waiting to hear that one. Anyway, the economics from the madhouse is quite an appropriate quote as well, especially when we're talking about an increase from 610,000 to 2 million. I believe that is certifiable, quite frankly. When we're talking about the build costs, I work for a construction company, and I can categorically tell you that if any of our QSs or estimators were this far off, we would A, be bankrupt, and B, they would be out of a job, quite honestly. They would, because that's how the people out there work. In the construction world. I can also say that looking at the report that was given to us at the last council meeting that we couldn't talk about, we didn't get time to, there's a note in there that says, over the last 12 months, design meetings to identify the exact scope and extent of works necessary to turn Units 1 and 2 at Gresham Road into the Borough Council's new operational depot have taken place. Well, why then did it become such an urgent motion that needed to be done straight away? You've had 12 months of this, and again, coming from a construction background, 12 months is actually a lot of time to fit out what is effectively a warehouse. I went down there in May when the offer was open to visit, and I was shown a copy of plans for offices, shower blocks, everything that seems to be listed in here, mess rooms, meeting rooms, showers, toilets. It was stuck to the wall of the empty shell of the depot, and I was also told how they were going to have a one-way road system and where the parking was going to be, etc., etc. So it's not a surprise. That was in May. That was actually not long after I got elected. So again, I don't see how. Well, coming from a construction company, I don't see how these costs have changed so miraculously. You can't blame Brexit because actually the economy is not doing too bad after the Brexit vote either. It's in Brexit is mentioned in here, so I'm just putting that out there so you can't use it as an excuse. But I honestly don't see how this has happened, and effectively the residents are going to be paying for it. So I think, thank you very much for increasing the amount of money that we're indebted to.
Push the microphone eventually. Right. The residents of Nuneaton and Bedworth will not have a very happy new year with the major financial disaster of the new depot. When purchased for £1.475 million in 2015, 275,000 under the asking price, due to the council's ability to complete the purchase quickly. This was after several officers had visited the site to evaluate and assess the expenditure required to bring the depot up to serviceability. The evaluation was 625,000. However, 12 months later, after a further assessment, it was revealed that an extra expenditure was required. This was not 10% of the initial 625,000, but an extra 1.4 million. extra. The extra outlay, we're told, is for the development of extra offices, meeting rooms, showers, mess room, construction of a vehicle workshop, new parking areas, installation of a new draining system to deal with possible fuel spillage, installation of lighting, construction of a new road down one length of the site. I am amazed that these additional works were not identified in the initial costings during the assessment of the site. Reports from the Council state that the additional expenditure will be sourced from reserves and capital receipts of the sale of St Mary's Road and the Council House. And the borrowing of 1.2 million and the cost of borrowing 1.2 million will be 24,000, which according to the report can be met from the additional revenue savings arising from the new maintenance shared service with Coventry City Council, totalling 54,000. So we were going to make 54, now we're going to only make 30. So in total, the new depot is going to cost the residents of Nuneaton and Bedworth a total of 3.5 million, which is a huge increase on the initial costs of 2.1. So I now ask, is it possible to have a full budget procedure of the costings of the new depot? And I believe the Cabinet Member for Finance and Civic Affairs has let the residents of Nuneaton and Bedworth down and has failed in your responsibilities. So will you do the honourable thing and stand down? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A few comments tonight. Incompetence, shambles. Let me add two more words, financial mismanagement, because there's no other way to look at it. If you do the research, commit to a project, put it forward in a budget, scrutinise it as a leadership team, as a cabinet, stand behind it, put it forward to council, it all gets voted on, and it turns out to be that far wrong, somebody is accountable. We don't care who, but one of you has got to stand up and say you're accountable. Otherwise, what's the point of having you? What's the point of you being the cabinet and the leader if you're doing no function? I've heard you trying to blame officers saying, oh, well, we've just taken their advice, or it's the managing director. Stop trying to pass the buck. We hear that at every single council meeting. It's always someone else's fault. This
phrase or sentence, I've said this evening, criticising the officers. I have said I fully support the advice that was given.
Video later. I like the video. So we're in a situation of clear financial mismanagement. Nobody can allege that, oh, it's all just come to light. We've just heard that councillors went round there. They were shown the plans to have a workshop and showers and meeting rooms were up on the wall. And they were obvious because it was just a shell anyway then. Yet 8 months later, all of a sudden, the 600,000 was going to do all that work is now 2 million quid. And nobody has given any detailed explanation. This motion simply asks for the portfolio holder to bring forward an explanation and a detailed business plan for how it will now be delivered. Because for all we know, if you've got it 1.4 million wrong so far, who's to say in another 8 months it won't be another 1.4 million? You just keep writing cheques and squandering money that isn't yours, that you get out of the council taxpayers. You need to remember who pays for all of this. I think sometimes Labour members forget. Now, this is financial mismanagement, and financial mismanagement is something we are going to keep going on about because it encapsulates what is wrong with the leadership of this council. Let's give you just one other example. The car parking charges. Oh, we're going to put them up. We said cut them. You put them up. You've lost us £250,000 already. That's financial mismanagement. This was, so that was 250,000 wasted and lost. This is another 1.4 million wasted and lost. How many other gaffes have you got to make before one of you on the Cabinet will take responsibility? Are you exercising any leadership? Are you exercising any scrutiny? Do you actually examine and ask the proper questions? Or actually, are you beyond? Have you lost your grip? Are you not capable? Are you incompetent? It's a word that's come out a few times. Actually, it's not nice to say it, but clearly, 600,000, oh yes, we'll have a full council on that, yeah. And then it's 1.4 and no one can, extra and no one can explain why. That's incompetent. That's a failure of leadership to scrutinise and make sure that the budgets were correct. You have failed. It has cost taxpayers £2 million. One of you needs to take responsibility.
Councillor Pomfret.
Well, if you're looking for somebody to take responsibility, here I am.
Resignation accepted. Thank you.
I have listened carefully to what members opposite have said, and I will deal with some of their assertions in a moment. What I will do is put events and decisions in their wider context and show why I know what is being undertaken is the right thing to do. That's taking responsibility. Our authority has a concerted policy of reducing its day-to-day running costs so that adequate resources can still be put into the services our residents need and have come to expect. The need to tightly manage our resources is made the greater when having to cope with £1 million per year cuts every year. The vacating of the Council House, agile working and the IT strategy were the first and major part of these efforts. Gresham Road is the next steps. In the long term, it saved money. Listen to what I say. Read what the Managing Director said in his notice. The circumstances around the decision to purchase are well known and have already been mentioned and debated. That decision was the correct one. The alternative does not bear consideration. The likelihood is that if we had not bought Gresham Road, we would still be looking for some years, and it is possible that it would take a decade or more. This would mean that we would have to continue the use of an increasingly dilapidated St Mary's Road, with increasingly poor working conditions for our employees and an increasing challenge in providing services out of that base. Madam Mayor, here is the crux of the issue. The depot is the heart of our operations, and although many of us here in the chamber tonight perhaps rarely go there, without it and the people who are based there, many of the services we provide would be impossible. Now, that would be controversial. To keep St Mary's Road site operational, we would have to start spending hundreds of thousands of pounds per year to update or replace facilities there. This process would inevitably make it difficult to maintain the continuity of our services without incurring yet more expense. Yes, the cost of purchase, the cost of works, these are all immense sums of money, but I have no doubt the right decisions have been made. The total cost of new depot, including finance costs, is estimated to be £70,000 per annum over 50 years. Indeed, the Cabinet report of June 2015, if you've read it, identifies £71,000 per annum as being the revenue costs likely to be saved in vacating St Mary's Road. I'll repeat that. £70,000 per annum over 50 years. Cabinet report says that we're going to save £71,000 per annum on revenue costs by vacating St Mary's Road. By way of further illustration of the positive financial aspects of our decisions, did you know that the cost of works to provide North Warwickshire's depot at Lower House Farm was £3.2 million? That's less than the sums we're talking about. And this did not include the purchase of the land. That makes it much more. Ours is costing £3.6 million, less the capital offset from the sale of St Mary's Road, and at the very, very least, £0.9 million, giving £2.6 million, whereas our neighbours cost £3.5 million plus the cost of the land. So, Not only is the decision to purchase the correct one, so are the subsequent decisions in terms of work to be undertaken and how they are to be financed. But, I'm not being listened to now, even though I'm being held to account, but the process of holding costs down is not over. As work progresses, every cost will continue to be put under the microscope, ensuring that nothing is overspecified and inputs are always acquired at their lowest price. So there are value engineering processes in place, alongside our usual overview and scrutiny panels, to hold decision makers to account. We are content that these are more than adequate. I do not support the imposition of extra costs of officer and other people's time in the invention of additional forms of accountability. Finally, Madam Mayor, did you know, I know you did because I told you the other day, that St Mary's Road has been council-owned since 1871, before most of us were born, with small additions in the 1920s and has operated as a depot since the 1960s, so for about 50 years. This really puts waiting some months, the costs and the 50 years we are building for at Gresham Road in context. Madam Mayor, the important thing to residents is that costs are kept down and that we have service continuity and quality. Madam Mayor, we are making major investments in services to our communities. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson, you have the right to sum up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, when I made my opening statement that no one is disputing the need to move from St Mary's Road. I said that quite clearly and quite categorically, that we do need to move from St Mary's Road because it is unsustainable. The question is, are we doing the right thing? Have we made the right decisions? Now, it has been said, quite rightly by the opposite side, these issues have built up. Yes, they have built up. They built up over a number of years. And although we weren't exactly happy with the method of the purchase, we accepted that we needed to move, and it appeared at the time we were getting a good price for the purchase of the property. What is difficult to understand and believe is that when we agreed to purchase on the 17th of June 2015, it has taken 18 months to work out we need an additional £2 million in which to renovate the site to make it fit for the purposes which we have. That is the disagreement. How come it has taken 18 months to work that out? It doesn't happen 24 hours overnight, which justifies, really, in our view, the managing director taking an emergency decision. 18 months isn't emergency. It's actually probably stagnation, in my view, that you've let it get that far. Now, if we look at the costs, yes, I did actually read the Cabinet reports, Councillor Pomfret, and I accept it says that we will make 71k worth of savings and 54, but we are now going to incur 24k worth of charges per year to service the debt we are now taking on. By my reckoning, that makes a balance of 101k benefit to the Council. I agree with that. But in addition now to the borrowing we have undertaken, it will take, bearing in mind that the overall budget is about £3.5 million, 35 years to pay off the costs of moving to St Mary's Road, from St Mary's Road to Gresham Road Depot. That is what we are saying. And if you are disagreeing with the fact we are asking for a business plan and you think it's additional expenditure and unnecessary, you are voting against sound project management. That should have been in place to begin with. If you haven't, then that is incompetence. That isn't doing your job properly, and it is why you deserve to be held to account by this chamber and by the residents. The contractors also have to make sure that they are doing the right job too. Now, we've said that nothing has been overspecified. You specified nothing if you didn't believe that these additional costs were going to be incurred and didn't answer them before it got to this stage. If you had done your jobs properly and worked this through logically, a report would have gone to Cabinet within 6 months of us purchasing the Gresham Road site for the new depot, and you would have specified, actually, we purchased this property, but we need X, Y and Z to make it work for us. If that had happened, you would have been following the correct procedures and project management standards which we should expect. That isn't making party politics. That isn't asking you to do something extra. Quite frankly, Madam Mayor, it is asking you to do your job. And that's why we support this motion. And I call for a recorded vote so that we can actually put it on record who's doing their job properly and who isn't.
I'll move to the vote on this matter.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will read out the name of each member in alphabetical order, who will then indicate if they are for or against this motion. Councillor Aldington. Against. Councillor Beaumont. Against. Councillor Bennett. Against. Councillor Bonner. For. Councillor Brindley apologies. Councillor Copland. Against. Councillor Daffin. Against. Councillor Doherty apologies. Councillor Doughty apologies. Councillor Elliott. Against. Councillor Gazane apologies. Councillor Glass. Against. Councillor Golby. For. Councillor Gran apologies. Councillor Gutteridge. For. Councillor Hancox. Councillor Harvey. Councillor Haynes. Councillor Jackson. Councillor Kondaka. Councillor Tony Lloyd apologies. Councillor Ian Lloyd. Councillor Longdon. Councillor Margrave. Councillor Caroline Phillips. Councillor Neil Phillips. Councillor Gwyn Pomfret. Councillor Margaret Pomfret. Councillor Jill Shepherd. Councillor Tracy Shepherd apologies. Councillor Tandy. Councillor Tromans. Councillor Watkins. And Councillor Wilson.
So the motion's lost. Now move on to item 6. Sheltered housing provision. Councillor Wilson as the first signatory. Do you wish to move the motion?
Thank you much. As printed. No one is denying that councils in this age of austerity are in a difficult position. We have known that since the great crash of 2008, a crash which, although members opposite hate to be reminded, it was their watch, and they still refuse to be held accountable for the massive deficit which we now face. It's an undeniable fact that we face a deficit due to the incompetence of the previous Labour government, and that is why Labour weren't returned to power at the 2015 general election. Difficult decisions have to be made. The County Council have had to make difficult decisions. Am I happy with it? No, I'm not. Am I happy with all the decisions which happen at the County Council or by government? No, I'm not. But they have had to cut their coat according to their cloth. It's as simple as that. That does, admittedly, have a knock-on impact to us. The choice we have as a council is how we implement that knock-on effect. The proposal which has gone out to consultation and went to Cabinet is not, in our view, a fair or equitable or reasonable solution to the challenges which we are facing with regard to the supporting people services. In this document, which I have kept a copy of, it sets out 3 options. The Cabinet couldn't support option 1. Agreed. The difference is between option 2 and option 3. It's a shame, actually, that in the consultation which has gone out to residents, option 2 and 3 haven't gone out, and that is really the crux of the issue for us here. Because the residents we have spoken to on this issue have said no one has actually asked us whether we want to pay more for our services. Perhaps that's an option which could have been put in the consultation document. They haven't said, actually, we would be willing to see the council look at other ways of funding the gap. In option 2, and I'm limited in what I can say, because it is on pink paper, and I would urge, in the interest of fairness and openness, for the Cabinet to now declassify this document so residents understand fully the implications of the consultation and decisions they're being asked to make. Option 2, whilst difficult, does provide ambit and scope for this council to act. It would, for example, if we were to look at using properly, in the interest of residents and a fair interest of residents across this borough, perhaps looking at a bridging loan for those couple of years where we go into a deficit, using the borrowing powers, which the council is quite willing to use to prop up its financial mismanagement, but is unwilling to use to actually help those who are in greatest need. With some creative thinking outside the box, and actually putting residents first, we could actually see, yes, a changed service, but one which would see 23 people less being made redundant. At the last full council, in the absence of the portfolio holder for housing, and I understand that Councillor Harvey answered the question, I asked on the Cabinet papers how many residents are actually in categories 1, 2 and 3 for their supported services. The leader undertook to write to me with the answer. To date, no such answer has been forthcoming. Before I asked the question at full council, myself and Councillor Golby asked officers the same question. Unfortunately, officers have not answered that question to date in a form which is understandable and actually provides the figures of who is in category 1, 2 and 3. In effect, residents are subsidising their own services. Perhaps they will be willing to consider changes. For example, category 1 sees them only pay £2.43 per week. Category 2, £18.66 per week. And category 3, £38.42 per week. In my view, and in the view of the opposition, option 2 is fairer, equitable and more sustainable if you use your noggins, quite frankly, and look at how you can do things a bit more creatively. I am willing to support our older residents and older people in their dotage and in their very well-earned retirement years. And that is something which is worthwhile this council taking on an additional expenditure for. It can be done, it should be done, and that is why we say in our motion that we are deeply disappointed, actually, that you have had 2 years' notice and have failed to act until now. That is a damning indictment, Madam Mayor. You had notice and you failed.
I'll second the motion and reserve my right to speak, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Now I open the item for debate. Any member?
And if those were the words I used at the last full council, you will understand that due to personal circumstances at the last moment, Councillor Jackson was not able to attend the council, along with actually another member of the cabinet, I believe, wasn't here. So I was having to try and cover 3 portfolios and didn't know the detail of some of these things at the meeting. So I do apologise if those were the words I used, and I will ensure that Councillor Wilson does get that information. It could have been asked for, of course, since then, Madam Mayor. Every councillor is entitled to such information. You don't have to wait till a full council meeting to ask it. But I will ensure that that is given, and I do apologise. But just on this, Madam Mayor, I don't want to be picky, but I'm presuming that it's 2 years with the apostrophe after the S, because otherwise it means 1 year there. But the point is, Madam Mayor, what Councillor Wilson is basically saying is that we should have been cutting services at the sheltered schemes 2 years ago, rather than what we have been doing, which is keeping going as long as we could the fantastic service we have. No other council in Warwickshire has the level of sheltered accommodation that we do. Right from 1974, it has been one of our top priorities. People who sat in this gallery 2 years ago, I think it was 2 years ago when this first happened, knew perfectly well who was cutting the money, because it's being cut by the county council. Now you may say, oh well, they've got to cut their cloth, etc., etc. Go and look at some of the cloth in there. Go and look at some of the carpets in the leader's office and the chief executive's office. Go and look at how much they've spent giving themselves a life of luxury. And then come and tell us that, oh, they're having to make little cuts here, there and everywhere. You can't get some of the people at the top because they're always junketing somewhere or other. Madam Mayor, the housing service for our older people is essential to us. There are rules about where we can move money between accounts, and again, I hope the opposition will begin to learn in this, because we are not masters and mistresses in our own house in this respect, but this originally comes right from the top, comes from the government. And you know, I know they like to call cuts transformation. Transformation means less service. And in the end, it's come down to us, Madam Mayor. Quite simply, it's come down to us. And it pains us to have to do with any suggestion that we've put out for consultation, Madam Mayor. But I can say one thing. We don't spend all our lives junketing like some of your colleagues.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I really hate supporting Tories at Shire Hall. They're not always my best friends, but things have gradually changed there. So I don't think we should be saying they're junketing nowadays. A lot of the money being spent on Shire Hall is in the old courts to make it into a business so it can actually pay its way. Getting on to this report, it's absolutely appalling what's happening in our sheltered housing. We're going from 50 members of staff to 14 or 16, depending on how you read it. And it's a very, very abrupt change. I would hate that we started cutting services 2 years ago, but we should have been thinking about efficiencies 2 years ago so that we didn't need to make such a radical change today. 50 down to 14 or 16 is an almighty change. We have two standards at the moment, very sheltered and normal sheltered. We're going to very slightly sheltered is going to be the scheme. There is lots of concerns over how the scheme works, who has ward, who has keys, what access there is and the continuity. We have just out the papers for next week's Housing Scrutiny Committee. It mentions the consultation, it mentions people have individual concerns. It doesn't mention what any of the concerns of the residents are in detail. The consultation has been an absolute sham. And what we should be looking at is not trying to just cover up and say, well, we're going to this slightly sheltered scheme. We should actually be studying what level of sheltered housing people need, because they don't all need the same. They won't all cope on very sheltered, slightly sheltered or whatever. We have a big variety of needs, and people's needs will escalate potentially as they get older. So we could transform the service. We could go from 50 staff to 40 staff or some lower number, but not as low as 16 or so. And we should have been working with county. How can we go and something as important as this and not be in an active dialogue with the county council to look out which people in our very sheltered schemes actually need to be in one of the care schemes? We should have been working on this for years, making the changes early and doing a proper consultation. This is an illegal consultation. People aren't told what the options are. Where's the consultation form? People mention consultation forms. There was no form. We don't know what happened in most of these conversations, and most of the relatives have not had an opportunity to respond to this consultation. Because what's the consultation? What are the options? What's happening? How much do the options cost? We have made a total dog's dinner of this. We've called it a consultation when it's not, and we've taken everyone from 2 levels of care to a very, very poor level of care. This is absolutely appalling, and I hope, unfortunately I hope, that someone takes it to court over this, because consultations over such things should be meaningful. They should give people options, i.e., do you want to go for option 1, which means you pay more, or option 2, which means you have lesser service, or whatever. You should have done that sort of thing, so that although there was less money available, people could have worked out, did they need more service, or did they need to spend more money? This is a total sham.
Councillor Gelby.
I'd just like to add some agreement with what Councillor Condacor has said. And I suspect, again, having had contact with people that are actually fighting these cuts, if you want, if you actually asked the residents, they'd actually rather have a limited service than no service at all. No one's asked if they want to pay extra. That was something else. The fact of the matter is, you can blame the junkets or whatever you want to blame it on. That we've got to deal with the matter at hand. And if it was so, I can't even get my words out because I don't really know how to articulate the frustration of having this on pink paper. But why didn't you give option 2 the light of day? We could borrow the money, as has been said. It's a temporary thing to just do that. I'm sure we could actually find it. Again, I'm struggling to articulate myself because it's all on pink and it's all hush-hush, which again is, it's just wrong. It's wrong. If you're not that bothered, if it's you want to be open and honest, then take this off pink paper and let the residents read it. that I'm asking you now, take it off the pink papers and let the residents have a choice. Do they want to pay more? Would they like option 2? We've read option 2. We think it's viable. You know, and again, going on about, so, to coin a phrase, sick of hearing about people banging on about county council on junkets. Well, the junkets that they go on actually do help this borough sometimes because of the MIPing. Is that a junket? Doesn't that try and bring business into the town? And it is. I'm sick of hearing about it. Sick of hearing about banging on. I'm not a county councillor yet. That, you know, give me some time. Sure. Yeah. Well, I think my residents might enjoy it if I was. But you know, if Stratford and Warwick are so brilliant, why don't you move there? As was one of the phrases that was put out by one of your members about Hinckley and people talking about other things. So again, I'm papers and let people have a fair consultation and not just go to them and say this is what we're doing and this is when we're doing it, because that isn't a consultation. They need the choices. Thanks.
And she said, if I wanted to go somewhere, I didn't quite catch it, why didn't I move there? Could you tell me where it was you said I should be moving to?
References to Stratford and Warwick that you keep making about how everybody's carpets over there are a lot nicer and everything else. It was in response to that before. Just what?
They haven't mentioned Stratford, and I certainly wouldn't want to live there.
Councillor Tandy.
I can't wait to see you at the County Council, Mrs. Colby. That will be fun. It really is, Madam Mayor, typical of the Conservatives that they blame Labour. The record is becoming a little bit scratched. Previously in this chamber, we were told that the cessation of the Supporting People funding would affect Nuneaton and Bedworth more than anywhere else in Warwickshire. That is solely because over many years, Labour in Nuneaton and Bedworth has looked after their elderly and vulnerable residents. Despite the untruths that I've heard all over the place, and I've heard a few more in this chamber this evening, that everyone knows that these proposals are a result of actions taken by the Conservative administration at the County Council and other parties in not supporting Labour's budget this year that put back in the Supporting People funding. This wouldn't be happening if they had done so. Stop trying to lay the blame at Labour's door. Try blaming your own or even the Green Party for not caring enough about our elderly and vulnerable people in this borough by firstly withdrawing and then not supporting the inclusion of the Supporting People funding. Your colleagues had every chance to reinstate that funding and chose not to. So stop blaming Labour now.
Thank you. I'm sure many residents, from what Councillor Wilson said about the motion, though, it's not as the motion reads. The motion actually talks about collaboration and working collaboratively with the county. And really, I have a question. Is collaboration not already happened? 2 years ago, when I was first elected for Attleborough, I worked with local residents and my colleagues having meetings at the complexes, and I've since visited complexes. I've met with residents and helped them to fill in forms. And I know that my ward colleague and other county colleagues as well have been leading the fight on this issue. I know how scared people are, and it's a direct result of the cuts to the Supporting People Fund. Now, I would be interested in what colleagues across the floor are saying, that you disagree with those cuts. And if you do disagree with those cuts, I'd like to know what you've done to call upon your colleagues, County Council and MPs to do a U-turn, because you know the impact on the residents of this borough, and if you genuinely know that it's a wrong thing that they've done at Shire Hall, I would ask you to stand with us against that decision and argue for change. Now, Labour have put forward a motion to save the Supporting People Fund at the County Council. They've done other work on the issue, and it's really time for you to step up to the plate. Instead of the County Council spending £1 million on cattle sheds or all the other money they waste, we are the poor relations in the relationship with Warwickshire, and local people deserve better. I don't want any of this to be happening, and it's all a result of cuts. So if you are genuinely against any kind of cuts or any kind of reduction in services, you know where the issue has come from, and you know, Councillor Golby, I hope that you don't get to the County Council at any point really, but under a Conservative banner, that is, you may come back and join Corbyn again, and you could be a Labour County Councillor, I'm sure. But could I ask colleagues that if you genuinely believe that this should not be happening, that you go to the people who get the biggest share of the council tax, the County Council, and you join with us in asking Izzy Seckham and others to come here, justify why they're making the cut, and to reverse that cut so that none of the residents in this borough have to suffer because of decisions made over there in Warwick. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Jackson.
We're informed that my absence at the last council meeting was due on that lunchtime to a very close member of my family having died. I thought it might be helpful for our debate tonight to highlight the facts in relation to this matter. Firstly, as has been said, it is the Conservative-led Warwickshire County Council that has completely cut the money and not this council. Indeed, it is the Conservative-led County Council that initially proposed decommissioning of these older people's services in 2017. And it is that same Conservative-led County Council that decided to bring these cuts forward to 2016. I can confirm that Warwickshire County Council did not make its final decision in relation to the cessation of Supporting People funding until the 8th of October 2015, and not the 2 years referred to in the motion. We have, during the recent consultation, made appropriate referrals to Warwickshire County Council for any other support services they may have. I've probably visited around half of the complexes during this period, and I know that officers have, where appropriate, made sure those referrals are in hand. Given that all councils were advised that the detail regarding new government initiatives, such as higher value voids, was imminent, Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council took the decision to wait until it was able to understand the full financial impact upon the housing revenue account before it was able to make any decisions. Unfortunately, still, the government continues to postpone the release of these details, a matter I have taken up with 2 of the 3 MPs that I met with recently. This means that we have had to take the option to consider sheltered housing services on a risk-based approach. I would willingly have supported a motion tonight asking that Warwickshire County Council can reconsider its funding, that supported writing to the Secretary of State for Local Government asking for urgent clarity on various matters in the recent Planning and Housing Act. I simply cannot support the inaction of the motion before us tonight. It is a combination of Conservative policy and Conservative decision that has led to our recent consultation. This motion, put simply, achieves nothing. It does nothing. I would urge members opposite to speak to the MPs, as I have done, to make them aware of the very serious concerns we have. And I would urge you to contact Cabinet members at Warwickshire County Council also. I am saddened by the decisions made by Conservatives locally, and indeed by Conservatives in central government. I hope members of the opposition would share the sadness Labour members feel at the devastating cuts to services to older people. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Longdon.
Lessons going around. I'll give you one. I was sat where Bill was in 2014, and I wanted to speak on that proposition. And Hawksy said, "You sure you want to go on this?" I said, "Oh yes," because I got up after Councillor Tromans, who was supporting his county colleagues in stopping this money and closing down that money coming to this borough. And you said you weren't sure how much it cost, but it was actually written in the papers. I remember the figure of 6.3 million, but I think that was across the whole county. And you actually wanted to support it. And we said, no, we do not support this. And we sent the message straight back to the county council saying we do not support this and the consequences that it will have on this council. And you voted against it. You voted against it. You can't hide. It's probably in the minutes somewhere. I should have gone and looked it up. But you voted against it. And now you're coming back and saying we should collaborate with the people who made the cuts. We spoke to them. We virtually begged them, what Julie said and what June said, not to do this. But they took no notice. So how do you collaborate with somebody who takes no notice whatsoever of what you're saying? You can't. And with regard to what Councillor Condacore was saying, quite frankly, I think it's support the residents of the borough through the changes. That's exactly what's been going on. But I have no rights to know the personal circumstances of the people in those complexes. I have no rights to know that. The officers have been going around and sorting that out, and you've heard that where it's necessary, they have been given the support that they require. So for you to come here and say we should have all this detail, rubbish. We're not entitled to that detail because our officers have been doing that job. You could have gone to those meetings. Unfortunately, mine were changed, and I didn't know, but we've had that argument. But I went and spoke to residents. And quite frankly, what is being said here is a load of nonsense. It's just a political ploy trying to make us responsible for something that we're not responsible for because the real people responsible were the county council. And carry on doing it, keep doing it, and we'll keep knocking you down.
Before we move on to Councillor Aldington, I have got Councillor Ian Lloyd, Councillor Tremors and Councillor Hancock still to speak. Councillor Aldington.
This side tonight has, on more than one occasion, been accused of party politics. I give you Exhibit A. Because if that side were that concerned about the cutting of those funds, they would have taken their county colleagues to task 2 years ago. We found out it's not 2 years ago, so there is one fault in this motion. As the Labour group did at the time, led by Councillor June Tandy. On that very point, Madam Mayor, the hypocrisy from this side is tangible. You can smell it. Councillor Keith Condacore, a county councillor. I'm not a county councillor. He is a county councillor. Had an opportunity, Madam Mayor, to do this as a county councillor, to take the Tories to task, but instead he decided not to support the Labour budget for keeping that money in, rather than cutting it as the Tories eventually did. Finally, Madam Mayor, Councillor Wilson said that we haven't done anything for 2 years. We found out it's not 2 years, but we haven't done anything for 2 years. Actually, we have. We have, much to our credit and much to the Conservative county councillors' shame, we have, because we've actually found extra funding, and we put extra funding in. I can't, for the life of me, think the exact figure, but it's about £400,000 that we actually found to prop this up. So we've actually propped up the county council on this. So if anybody, they want to blame anybody, they should blame their county council colleagues. It's been said by Councillor Margrave, by Councillor Tandy, by Councillor Jackson tonight, and I would like to reiterate that, because they've done nothing to take those to task. They'll quite gladly come in here and point the finger and be sacrimonious, as they have been tonight, towards us, but they will not touch their county council colleagues, who are the real villains in all of this, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Ian Lloyd.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, we've heard a lot about incompetence tonight, hypocrisy, and, you know, here we go, we've got Councillor Wilson, who said the choice is with the borough. Well, let's turn that about a bit. Let's follow the money trail, as has just been said. The money trail started to be cut by a Conservative government, and three Conservative local MPs. They voted on it. They voted on supporting people and cutting that budget at government. So the choice was with them, Councillor Wilson, to start with. The choice is with us. The next choice was at the county council, as has been said, where they had the opportunity to keep the money in the budget. The Conservatives cut the budget. They cut the supporting people budget. Why did they cut the supporting people budget? Well, I suspect it's the north-south divide yet again, because who's got the most of the complexes? They're in their area. Yeah, Nuneaton and Bedworth, and very proud of it. They say we're hurting the very people that we're supposed to be supporting. Well, it's not us that's hurting them. I've just pointed out it's the government, three MPs, sorry. I keep saying two because I never see the other one. I see the other two even less. 3 MPs and then the county councillors. Let's go to the county councillors. They did have the opportunity. Councillor Condacourt turns around and say we're incompetent. Well, I'll throw it back at you, Councillor Condacourt. It's you that's incompetent. I've said on a number of occasions, you need to open your eyes and look where you're going, and you should do your job. You obviously didn't do your job that day, did you? Because you had the opportunity of supporting the Labour group's amendment to the budget, which put the money in, and you chose not to. And then what does he do? He goes to his local residents and says, hey, it ain't my fault. It's that Labour Borough Council. They're incompetent. But he didn't quite tell them all the facts. What you should do, Councillor, is go and tell them what actually happened at the County Council. I would say...
We need to be clear here. I've never voted for a Tory budget in my life.
Yeah, well, no, you're quite right. I didn't say that. But if you abstained against the Labour budget or abstained against the Tory budget, I'm sorry, you had the chance to support one of those budgets. You chose to support neither. So you did vote against them. So it is incompetence. He does far too much of it, sitting on the fence, putting his hand up to abstain and not thinking about the consequences. Well, Councillor Condacourt, Councillor Wilson, these are the consequences. At the end of the day, a ball will roll downhill unless you're kicking it very hard up. Well, we're trying to kick it very hard up, back to the county council to give us the money. All you have to do is go and see the county councillors, all the 3 MPs, and say, come on, please, support the very people that put you in, the old people within this area, the senior citizens that need our help. Support them. Put the money back in. If you put anything in, put it in. But please, don't put it in and then take it away somewhere else like you've done previously on the other report. So the choice is with you two. Incompetent? Yeah, you are.
Tromans.
So we've heard a lot tonight about follow the money. Let's follow the blame trail. You're all very keen on that, aren't you? Or the blame trail, and we'll stop it just at the bit that suits us, because actually, let's follow the blame trail. Why are we in austerity? What happened to us? You all, yeah. Oh, I'm glad you think it's funny, Councillor Longdon. I don't think it's very funny for the residents impacted on this. Let's follow the trail. Right back to Liam Byrne and his lovely letter. The money's all gone. They'd all spent it. And up the wall. All gone. Massive deficit. Country on its knees, almost in bankruptcy. Well done, Gordon Brown, for fixing the roof while the sun was shining. Not. So here we are. We're in a situation with massive debt, colossal spiralling out of control, and you have a coalition government that comes in and has to start trying to turn that round, and a Conservative government that was voted in. And if you guys had all the ideas and the trust of the public, you wouldn't have lost the election so convincingly. Annoying fact, but it happened. We're in a situation where people understand in this country that we were in desperate straits and that you cannot keep on spending more and more, because look at Greece. Look at the mess you get into when socialism just goes berserk. That's where we would have ended up. People realised that and they voted accordingly. Nobody wants to be trimming things unnecessarily. This is not an ideological thing. It's only happening because of the mess that the country was left in. Now, we've done that subject to death. What this is about Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council. And again, we're back to the usual thing. It's all someone else's fault. This time it's the county's fault. But actually it's not. It's the last Labour government's fault, and the one before that, who ran up the debt. It's as simple as that. You can say what you like, but the public know the truth. So we come down to the borough. What did you do? Oh, well, we've been working hard doing our usual trick of deciding definitely to do nothing until the money runs out, and then people get negatively impacted, people's lives get affected, but that suits us because we can blame the Tories at Shire Hall. The north-south divide and all the rest of it. What have you done? There was lots of opportunities, which, there's no reason for you to have put on pink paper. If you've got nothing to hide, you should be sharing that. You should have shared that with residents. You should have shared that with the wider public, so that people could see the options. If you can find 1.4 million extra that you've incompetently messed up on through your financial mismanagement as an emergency item one day, why couldn't you, for 1 year only, find the £700,000 that the option 2 would require? Why not do option 2? You don't want to talk about it, you don't want people to have the facts, because all it looks like is, yes, things had to be trimmed, there were options for you to manage that properly, but it would have required some work, some creativity, some effort. Engaging with the residents much earlier and properly engaging. And I take the point about confidentiality, but the whole point is when you do these surveys, when you find out, you anonymise them. You don't say Mrs. Jones said, it's just number of residents in this category, number of residents in that. But we also have another issue here, back to the financial mismanagement again. It's like, oh, well, the county stopped our money. They were paying for this service that we were then providing. But actually, weren't you also charging residents a fair bit of money all the way through? Weren't residents also, whether it was paid out of their housing benefit or whatever it was, weren't they also paying 28 quid a week, some of them, and some of them £4 a week and whatever? What's happened over all the decades to that money? I bet if you added it up, it's an awful lot of money. There's a lot of questions to be asked here. There's a lot more the borough could have done and should be doing. That's what this motion is about. This motion is saying, yes, we're in a bad situation in regards to the financing for this kind of thing, but you've just done nothing and made a bad situation get worse. You haven't fulfilled your role of protecting local people. You could have done more. Your own pink paper report says you could have done. That's what this motion is about.
Thank you.
Again, I've had something directed at me. Why did I reject a petition? I did not reject a petition. The officers rejected the petition under the Constitution. I didn't even know about it, which is quite correct. Don't keep... Sorry, madam. Say anything, it'll be in the press and everybody...
Councillor Hancock.
Madam Mayor, Councillor Tromans is correct. It is about blame. And people need to be clear where that blame lies. Councillor Tromans was clever how he swerved the earlier issue, which he didn't deny when he supported these things happening before, because clearly he did. And I have to say to everybody in this room, and I wish everybody in the borough of Nuneaton and Bedworth was here, this hurts everybody. But I tell you what, it must really hurt the people that were about at the time, and I don't mean to say particularly elderly Councillor Haynes, but Councillor Haynes was one of those councillors that I'm proud to be associated with, because they had the foresight to make sure that we provided, probably the first people in the country to provide this type of sheltered accommodation. And it must be heartbreaking for people like Councillor Haynes to see it being taken away from us by people that had nothing to do with setting it up in the first place. Madam Mayor, the motion includes that word again. The word that they voted against earlier on. That word being transformation. I'll say it again, don't care how many times I say it. Forget it, it's a long word, it means cuts. And the cuts, we go back to the blame thing, is caused by the government and the county. Government Tories, county Tories. What's more galling, Madam Mayor, is their boss, Theresa May, and her new shared society. Where's that? Where's that coming from? There's no evidence of that. Then, of course, Madam Mayor, you've got their other boss, Izzy Seckham, publicly critical of her own Tory government in regards to care of the elderly, social care. They won't be able to afford to have people to be helped out of in and out of their beds and to do their washing. It's what she said in the local government magazine and in other media. However, and it's been mentioned before, it's the hypocrisy of her saying that, and then she comes back to Shire Hall in Warwick and cuts funding to Nuneaton and Bedworth supporting people. It's also a very false economy. For all of you that are cleverer on the economy than me, it's a false economy because there's no doubt about it. It will impact on the social care within our borough. So, Madam Mayor, as a councillor like my ward colleague in Bede, Councillor Haynes, I think we probably have a large proportion of sheltered accommodation in our ward. We've got 4 different complexes in our ward because of the nature of it. And they are all deeply concerned about this. I do believe they do better understand now where the blame lies. So I'm going to say it once and for all and finish on this. Be clear. Everybody in here, I know we are, but to the public, be clear. This is the Tory-controlled county council that are making these cuts happen, not Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council.
Councillor Caroline Phillips.
Madam Mayor, I'm getting really fed up now with this it's Labour's mess, it's Labour's mess. So I'm just going to give the opposition a brief history lesson. In the United States, in the run-up to the banking crisis, subprime mortgages were sold in the United States. These mortgages were then put into complicated packages. They were hidden, and then the packages were broken off and sold here, there and everywhere, which is why it ended up being a global crisis. Now, the Labour Party did not force RBS to go out and buy various banks for millions of pounds that turned out to be worthless. That's the second lesson. The third is the Labour government had no choice but to bail out the banks, because if they hadn't, ordinary people like us up and down the country would have gone to their bank and there'd have been no money in it. There was no choice. And as far as this austerity goes, it's absolute nonsense. The only thing that austerity is paying for is tax cuts for the wealthiest people. The deficit has not been reduced. It is still the same as it was. But yet, elderly people are suffering, children are suffering, loads of people are suffering. But the millionaires have had their tax cuts, the inheritance tax has gone down and the corporation tax has gone down. Who has benefited? The rich.
Councillor Watkins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll try and stick to some of the motion and some facts. A couple of years ago, this came to scrutiny, and being chair of that scrutiny panel at the time, I took it to Cabinet and we called a special council meeting and brought this to a special council meeting. It's a supporting people budget that is getting cut. At the scrutiny meeting, we asked our travellers, homeless people, people like that was going to be consulted. There was no answers. They said they would go out and find them. They couldn't find them. We asked how they was going to consult with the people at the sheltered houses. They says that our officers would do that. So our officers would go and consult on how they would be made redundant. Crazy. I also went to lots of other meetings about this because it was crazy. Carver was there, Citizens Voice Bureau, lots of health people, because the knock-on effect to this, again, is going to be on the health. We've already had a discussion about the health, and you're putting more pressure on the health. Yeah. Brilliant. So, what did we do? Again, we took it to scrutiny, we brought it here, we consulted with all the residents. We have funded it for years, and what people don't understand is this is a Warwickshire County Council responsibility, and it's a Warwickshire County Council cut. We have supported it, we've done as much as we can here. So, answering some of your stuff on within the borough, and will we now work collaboratively with the County Council to support residents through the changes? We have. We've done as much as we can. However, we've had very little support of yourselves over there. And that, Madam Mayor, is wrapping it up. Thank you.
I shall be brief, only I will be brief. Councillor Caroline Phillips has mentioned about the financial crash and gave the history of how we got there. Now then, okay, the other side have a different opinion. I know who's right, but the other side have a different opinion. So what did they introduce when they get in government? Austerity. Okay? If we've got to do something because we haven't got a lot of money. But the thing is, what did they decide to do as a government? And this is part of the trickle down of it. What did the Tories do? They cut taxes for the rich, as has been said, but they took the money away from disabled, elderly, National Health Service, as we've heard, and women's pensions. Now, that's only a few things have taken the money away, so it's the choices. It's undeniable, guys and gals, what you choose to do when there's less money.
The right to reply.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Let's tackle this issue about the percentage of council tax head-on from Councillor Harvey. The reason why, and I'll let him into a little secret, the reason why council tax is because they provide 80% of the services of this borough. That is a fact. That is why we get 12%, the police gets the balance. We don't provide as many services as the county council. Fact. Again, he tries to actually deflect the issue by saying that I was arguing that we should have cut services earlier. Nothing could be further from the truth. I'm saying that while we were maintaining the services we have, you could have been doing a lot more work to actually figure out how we could lessen the impact. Because whatever you try and say tonight, ladies and gentlemen, about caring about the elderly, you are implementing the most savage cut to the supporting people budget that you could possibly do. You had other options in this document which could have been, with some creativity, with some foresight, with some thinking, a much more viable option, which would have protected more services, see 23 people less lose their jobs with this council, but instead you chose to cut savagely, probably to make a political point, because the cynic in me believes actually that you're going to try and use this as a political point in the run-up to the county council elections. Again, you are putting politics before people. You do it time and time and time again. And don't take my word for it. The actual report, the forecasts provided show that under your option, which you have decided to go for, the housing revenue account budget makes £20 million in revenue and surplus by 2026. You are making a profit on the backs of other people's misery. That is what you are doing with the options you are providing. Now, an amended option 2, yes, it would have some pain. Yes, it wouldn't see services as they are, but it would be a damn sight better than the services they're offering the residents in the consultation. Now, it's not very often I agree with Councillor Condacourt, and sometimes, to be quite honest, Madam Mayor, it pains me. But a consultation of one option is not a consultation at all. And we hear about how you're so proud about the housing services you've provided. Why was it you tried to sell them off all those years ago and then caused a public uproar and had to back down? Because the public didn't want it. You were so precious about the housing services then because you wanted to sell them off. Now, Councillor Margrave, to the registered social landlords. Now, Councillor Margrave goes on about cattle sheds. Perhaps he should read the capital budget which has gone through, because we're putting £500,000 into Valley Farm. So perhaps he should take that up with the leader of the council, because he's doing exactly the same as what the county council is doing, actually looking after their assets. Now, it's also about taking responsibility. You could have provided a fairer, more equitable reform to the services, but you have patently decided not to. And the scale of the petition should tell you something. I've helped organise petitions myself with residents, and they are angry, and you have refused to listen to them. It doesn't matter that the wording wasn't technically legally correct. It is the spirit that was behind that petition which counts for more and matters more than anything else the legal books can say. And you're flying in the face of that. Now, it may be painful for the Labour Party to recognise, and Councillor Tandy calls it a record becoming scratched. It's because it is a record you are ashamed of that you left the largest deficit in peacetime history. That you also, because it takes, and history proves this, you talk about giving us a history lesson, Councillor Phillips, it always takes a Conservative government to fix the problems of a Labour government. We proved it in 79 and we proved it in 2010. And we will continue fixing the economy, which you left in a bad situation. We have now paid down 2/3 of the deficit, and you talk about tax cuts. Actually, we are receiving more from the wealthiest people in this country through the reforms to the taxation system. Don't take my word for it. Take the House of Commons Library for it. They're impartial, they're independent, far more than you will ever be. So this motion is actually asking you to work with the County Council. Izzy Seckham isn't my boss, but she's my co-worker, and I actually do talk to her, and I talk to the County Council cabinet members far more than you ever do, because you know what I get every time I go to Shire Hall? It's the fact that you guys refuse to work with them, and that is what is so damn...
Statement is 100% correct. Thank you, Chairman.
Well, that's not what I get from the portfolio holders at Shire.
You said.
Anyway, the issue about sheltered housing is an important one. I urge members to support this motion and actually look at how we can support residents and not endorse the savage cuts which are in here. De-pink this paper and let residents see what you're really up to.
Really, I'm just asking if I suppose, Director, but I do think every member of the council should be sent a letter tomorrow pointing out what in actual fact are the proportions that are given over from council tax to the borough, the police and the county council, because Councillor Wilson has quoted a figure which is totally wrong.
Members happy for that to happen? Yes. Okay, the letters to come out. Yeah. For clarity. Yes. So I'm moving to the vote. So all those in favour of the motion, please show. All those for? Against? Abstentions? So So that the motion is lost. So can I thank councillors and the ladies and gentlemen of the gallery for behaving so well. That concludes the business of the extraordinary council meeting. Can I remind members about the Mayor's Appeals quiz on Friday this week at the Anchor Inn? And thank you very much for your business.